Clutch Trucker filmed before a live and furry studio audience, and now he's de-snowed. Had to knock all the snow off of him after we got parked today, right? Hey YouTube, Clutch Trucker here. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Clutch Trucker channel. Well, up here in Gale storm territory, up here in Pennsylvania, I'll show some dash cam here just before I'm getting to the TA in Harrisburg. Well, it's northeast of Harrisburg. But, you know, I've explained this before. TAs always like to pick the nearest major town, even though it's not. It's closer to Hershey than anything else. But anyway, actually, I was expecting to see a lot more snow off the side of the road up here than I'm seeing now. The road itself is dry, which is nice. It's Friday morning, the 18th of December. A huge storm Gale came through. Delivered in Baltimore this morning. Last night, dealt with some icy conditions on I-81 in Virginia, and that got a little hairy for a while there.
Exit 77 on the right, but Pennsylvania 39 west, then
not,
left.
Oh hush, not too terrible. So I was going to reserve a spot here at the TA, but they show they have no reserved spots available. So I think that means there are lots too covered in snow. So we'll see what that looks like when we get there. Lots fairly well plowed right now, you can see. But you can see these giant hills of snow that they had to pile up over there. So obviously, yeah, over the last 2 days they got quite a bit. But they did a pretty good job at this TA of cleaning it up. Check the app again, and all these reserved spots you can see from that truck down there at the end, all of them up here to where I'm at, all available. Those are all reserved spots down that side, but check the app again and it says there's 0 reserved spots available. So that tells me you can't boot me out later, because I tried to reserve a spot and you didn't let me. So if anyone comes knocking on my door later, it's gonna get ugly. All right, now that we've covered all the weather stuff, I'm sure we're gonna have tons more weather stuff to view this winter. Really not as bad as I expected it to be up here anyway. Chris Kelly, the cabbie from England, who sent me that video months ago that I put on there all about a very, very narrow road he has to go down in England, sent me another video. I asked him to do one about pointing out things on his car, on his cab, and what the different names for might be other than what we call them. And so, we'll jump over the pond now. Take it away, Chris.
Hi, Clutch. I'm out here in the country side a little bit, and I've got 15 minutes to kill. And I remember I sent you a video, and your video certainly entertained me, so this might provide a few minutes of entertainment for you, hopefully. So you asked me to maybe name some parts of the vehicle. So I'm going to say the British name, and I think I probably know the American name for everything because, well, we watch American movies. I've been watching them since I'm a kid, and TV shows as well. So let's start. This vehicle, as some of the southern states might say, vehicle. This vehicle is a manual. We don't differentiate that's going past. That's just a car, and I presume that's manual. We don't specify when it's something's a manual. We only specify if something's an automatic because it's assumed everything is a manual. Now I do believe that's called stick or stick shift. That's something we'd never say. So it's just a car or it's an automatic. Interesting reason why that is a case, why we're so hooked on manual, is, but I believe back in the early days of cars, our roads being much smaller, the vehicles were consequently smaller and therefore easier to drive on manual gear. America being much bigger, vehicles being bigger, and therefore it was more convenient to have automatic vehicles. Automatic transmissions was easier, and then things have just carried on that way to the point where I think probably 75% of cars are manual, and it was a much higher percentage going back. So I think it's larger vehicles means it's the initial vehicles were automatic over in the States. So correct me if I'm wrong. So down to here, here's your favourite, the clutch. Obviously, I know you call it the clutch. Brake, which of course you know you call it that. This one might surprise you, the accelerator. Because why use 3 letters when you can use way more? That's just the general rule for English. That's the accelerator pedal, which I know you call the gas. Up front, the windscreen as opposed to windshield. That's one difference. Rear view, wing mirrors. Here we've got the indicator. That's the indicator, which I know might be called a blinker or a flasher. So that is the indicator, and then also the orange lights that flash outside either side of the vehicle. They're also called indicators as well. Headlights are the same. We have dipped and high beam. I presume that's exactly the same. This thing here is called the omnidirectional steering device, and I believe you call that the steering wheel. Well, we call it steering wheel as well. Windows are all the same. Center console's the same. Handbrake. This is obviously electric handbrake, which is a pain in the arse, really. The button is actually is wearing a little bit because the car's had a lot of hard use, and so now I have to sort of push it down there to ensure that the damn thing is on. Let's head outside for the obvious ones, which you know. Well, you've already said you know this one. The bonnet, which you guys will call the hood, which does sound... Bonnet sounds a bit like a... Bonnet's what an old Victorian lady wears when she's walking along in a finery. And of course, you know, the boot, which you guys call the trunk. And I think that is pretty much... alloys, wheels, that's all the same. Tyres are all the same. Oh yeah, we'll just call that license plate, or the reg plate. Mainly license plate, we'll call it. In the UK, we don't have. Once you purchase the car, it comes with a license, a registration. This lorry here has registration, and we don't have to pay any extra. I believe you've got to have, you call it a tag, and you have to pay for your tags. Tags can expire. That's not the case in Britain. You just have, you purchase the car, it's got a license, and as long as the car is roadworthy, what's written on there doesn't matter. It can't run out. So that's always a bit of a strange one, that way you can own the car legally. The car is road legal in terms of mechanically sound. And then a cop can pull you over because you haven't paid some money for a fucking tag. Maybe you can clarify for me on that. That seems a little bit another bloody thing to have to pay. But anyway, it killed a few minutes for you if you're pulled up over in Buttwad, Arkansas, or what was the other one? Earwax. You do make me laugh when you do your sample hours sheets, and then you make the made up names. Always make me giggle. Fish Guts Ohio. I think that might be one of them. That really tickled me. Okay, well, hope it's brought you a few minutes of entertainment. Thank you for the many minutes of entertainment you give me, and yeah, maybe let me know about the old plates there. Okay, see ya. Chris out.
So after he sent me that video, I basically had to beg him to let me use it. He said first it was just for my consumption, but I said, come on, let me put it on the channel. Then I sent him another email asking him, all about the different names for things that there might be, other than stuff on the car, like other traffic-related stuff and just some things in general. So I've got all of his responses. I had to write them down because they were on my phone, so I could kind of talk about those. And let's dive into that. America versus England. Yeah, I told him that I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and some of them by British authors. I found that Ruth Ware I really like. She did this one called The Woman in Cabin 16 or something. Great book, by the way. And so I listened to the next couple of ones from hers. And also by listening to those, I discovered this narrator I really like, Imogen Church. She's a really good narrator. So I looked up other books that she's narrated and found some good stuff. And so I've been kind of learning some of the English lingo because some of the things are very different from what we say here in America. So I thought, well, this would be kind of fun. So I asked him a whole bunch of questions Like, for example, I knew that tennis shoes or sneakers or whatever you want to call them, skids here in the United States, those are called trainers in England. And I asked him, I said, well, how many people are really training in them? You know, but like, again, I use tennis shoes is what I still call them, but I'm not playing tennis. So, yep, they're called trainers. A roundabout, like we have in the United States, it's still the same in England. It is a roundabout, and all the people scream and shout. Can you name that band? Also, they call what we call a semi-truck here, or a big truck. Simple to America, we like them simple to. That's a big truck. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They call it a lorry. I'm like, where the heck does that come from? And he gave me a good explanation. He said in 17th century England, lurry, L-U-R-R-Y, meant to pull or lug about. And he said that kind of just morphed into lorry. And so that's why a semi-truck in England is called a lorry. Most of them over there, by the way, are cab-overs, which we have hardly any of here in the United States anymore. Ours are what you would call a conventional cab with the hood sticking out front. So that's kind of interesting. I asked about a speed limit sign. Is it called the same thing? And he said, yes, it is. It's a speed limit sign. He also said that he has a great picture. Let me show you that. No numbers on it. That just means that's the national speed limit sign. And he said it can mean 70 miles an hour if there's a median, or they call it something different. They call it a central reservation, other than a median. Or if there's no median, then it's 60 miles an hour. And he broke it down into miles per hour. I think he did that just for my benefit, where I'm sure it's really kilometers an hour. Just like if you drive down to Mexico, it's kilometers an hour. I know as a young lad, I was in Australia with my parents, and of course they were kilometers an hour. And we're going down this little tiny road, and the speed limit was 90. And I'm like, oh my gosh! Yeah, that's not that bad, really. Central reservation, to me that sounds like something, if you're calling like a Holiday Inn to book a room. Yes, I'd like central reservation, please. One thing I gotta throw in here, when my wife was pregnant with our first child, we had to be flown down, airlifted down to Albuquerque because there were some complications and so forth. Interesting story about that. While we're in we lived in the Farmington, New Mexico area at the time. When we're at the hospital, the pilot comes into the hospital room and says, how much does everybody weigh? Because it was a very small plane. There was room for the pilot, me, my wife, and one medical technician. So he had to know the weight of everybody before we could take off. And I had to sit up next to the pilot in the co-pilot seat. Of course, there's, controls and switches all around me. I sat like this. I was so afraid I'd hit something and we'd be like plummeting to earth. I didn't want to kill us all because I moved my knee or something. That was an interesting story. But related to that, my parents at that time were on vacation in Scotland. And they had the phone number for the hotel, and I'm at a payphone down in the lobby back when we didn't have cell phones, trying to call Scotland long distance. And of course, over the long distance lines and everything, they had a hard time understanding me, especially with my American accent. So yeah, I'm looking for the X and such family, and they're in room 4, I think. And they'd be like, sorry, I don't understand you. So I just put on a ridiculous British accent, and they had no problem. I'm like, yes, please, I'll set you for room 4, please. Thank you very much. And they rang me right through. Sometimes a bad accent can help you out. Okay, back to America versus England phrases and names. We say, of course, freeway or interstate. I asked him, what is that, equivalent? What's the equivalent there in England? So, well, the largest roadway they have is called a motorway. And then there's A and B roads. So like an A road being a little bit smaller without a central reservation, and a B road being the smallest ones. And he says still sometimes the speed limit's 60 miles an hour, even though you're just right by somebody, even with maybe no lines on the road. Wow. I asked him about turnpikes. That's what we call toll roads in a lot of places, and he said he had to Google that and look it up because he had never heard turnpike. He said, well, that sounds like something you do to a fish. Yeah, he said it's just called a toll road. He said they don't have very many. I asked him, okay, well, if you go out to a bar or a pub, and he said they're also called inns, so it can be a pub or an inn is a bar, equivalent for us. I said, okay, do you grab a beer or a pint? Do you ask for a pint? He said, well, you can ask for either one, because that would be the same thing. But we would never say, we would just say, I want a beer, or a draw, meaning a draft beer. We would never describe it by the amount of liquid. We'd never say, yeah, I want a 12 ounce. But they asked for a pint. I remember from years ago, I think it was like late 80s, there was a John Goodman movie where he ends up being the sole heir to the crown in England. I can't remember what the... King Ralph! That's the name of the movie. And they bring him a dessert in England. They said, would you like some spotted dick? And he's, of course, he laughs uncontrollably. And I said, all right, I saw this in that movie. Is that really a dessert in England? And he said, yes, it is. Spotted dick is actually, what did he say? It's a traditional suet pudding. Or suet pudding. He said, yeah, it sounds like something you might want to see your doctor about. I've got spotted dick. But apparently it is a traditional dessert, and many ladies in England fancy a nice spotted dick. Growing up in Colorado, we called a Coke, meaning any soda pop. You know, like you'd order at a restaurant at Denny's. Yeah, I'd like a Coke. Well, what flavor? Oh, orange. So I said, well, what does that equate to? Or a lot of times we say soda in this country. I said, what is it there? And he said, well, it's either pop or fizzy drinks. But soda, he said, nobody says that. I said, how about a crosswalk? Do you call it that? He said, no, it's a pedestrian crossing. Doesn't that sound very British? Oh, it's the pedestrian crossing. Cheerio. I asked him about turning right on red, because we can turn right on red lights here in this country. Of course, they drive on the other side of the road. So I said, same situation. If you're turning from one left, or in the left lane, onto another road turning left, can you turn left on red? And he said, no. And he said he never really experienced that before until he came to this country, and he said it still threw him off. He wasn't prepared for that. As I mentioned earlier, he said the national speed limit is 70 miles per hour. I think, like he said, he was putting in miles per hour just for my benefit, and 60 for trucks and cars towing caravans. And you might say, well, what is that? A caravan, to us, would be like a long line of cars or a long line of vehicles. Caravans, what they call a travel trailer or an RV. They call that a caravan. So I just find that all very interesting. Different countries around the world. When I visited South Africa as like a 15 or 16-year-old boy with my father, was doing some work there, the traffic lights there are called robots. In England, they're called traffic lights, but robots is what they call them in South Africa. My mother and I were asking for directions from the hotel to like a shopping center. Oh, you go three robots up the road, and we're like, robots? I was expecting to see like that guy from, you know, Lost in Space. Danger, danger, Will Robinson, danger. I do know, like, this one other one that's kind of interesting to me. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and there's this British author, Robert Brindza, B-R-Y-N-D-Z-A, who's got this great series of books about this detective, and I can't remember her name now. But they're great books. And she was talking about how people in the pubs were always playing the fruit machines. They're sitting at the fruit machines. I'm like, what do you mean the fruit machines? Like they're giving out apples and pears? And no, those are slot machines to the British. That's what we would call a slot machine. They call them a fruit machine. Chris, you may be mad that I've opened up a can of worms maybe by you contacting me, but really appreciate all the info. It's a lot of fun to compare differences in our cultures. I think that's really neat. And yet, something like the internet, the World Wide Web and all that, does bring us all closer together in a way. So, Chris, I consider you a friend, even though I haven't actually ever met you. But thanks for all the info, and thanks for supporting the Clutch Trucker channel and giving us some fun info to talk about. You the man. Appreciate it, buddy. You the man. What would be the British equivalent to you the man? I wonder. Oh, well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. I love that guy, Chris Kelly, the cabbie in England. He sent that video before, and if you scroll down, you'll find it, where he was showing a really narrow road he has to drive in England sometimes, after I posted one about some narrow roads in Pennsylvania. And so then I said, hey, why don't you throw one together about showing me the different names of things on your car, you know, because some of them are named differently than what we say. So I thought that'd be lots of fun. And then, of course, all the extra questions I asked him that he answered in an email for me. Fun stuff. So if you got anything you'd like him to do, pass it on to me. You can. I have an email, clutchtrucker@gmail.com. You can always email, and maybe we can get Chris to do some other fun stuff. Or if you have any other questions about England for him, I think that would be lots of fun. What do you think? The excitement. It's just thrilling. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe if you would like to. Please comment. Please like, only if you'd like to, though, by the way. I'll accept all comments, all likes, and all that. Check out our Patreon and Coffee if you'd like to help support the channel. Check out Instagram, Clutch Trucker at Instagram and Clutch Trucker at Twitter. I put little shorter, quick things on there, just sometimes kind of like daily update kind of stuff, and little quick videos on those, all right? And as always, sniff that magic YouTube fairy dust. Clutch and Rusty, out. It takes a big man to admit when he's wrong. I am not a big man.